Hello and welcome to Property Matters, supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. You can find our weekly property show every Sunday on propertymatterstv.co.uk or by searching Property Matters TV on YouTube or Facebook. Whenever and wherever you're enjoying the show, please get involved by adding your comments in the comments section below. And if you'd like to email us, the address is hello@propertymatterstv.co.uk. Property Matters is also available as a podcast from our website, and it's available to stream or download from 10 o'clock every Monday after the Sunday episode on any one of those 8 podcast platforms that you can see on the screen now. So this week, Joe, we decided to move a little bit away from the cost of living crisis, because we've covered that fairly thoroughly the last few weeks, and have a look at some of the more positive aspects, perhaps, of property. And the particular first area that we're looking at today, Joe, is the area of small-scale development. So a lot of people saying that buy-to-let has lost its luster. I think one person said in one piece this week, and it was once attractive, but there is another way, of course, that you can make money from property, and it's obviously a highly attractive asset class in which you can invest. But that is, of course, small-scale property development, and that's transitioning from being a landlord maybe to a property developer. So what is that? Well, it's small-scale development typically is looking at 5 to 20 units, for example, a group of flats or apartments that you would provide a profit of around 100 to 500,000 over a period of up to 2 years. And that's considered apparently to be the real sweet spot, since these projects are more profitable and many ways more straightforward than self-build or flip. And they're too small for the larger house builders to be bothered with, so you get less competition for the projects. What's your thoughts on small-scale property development, Joe?
Yes, it's nice to actually switch off from the continuing saga of what's been happening in the marketplace and look at some of the real advantages, Paul. And it's a great subject to discuss. Small scale development is almost like an upgrade from being a buy-to-let landlord. It's like the next promotion that you can create yourself. So first of all, it's always about getting yourself a portfolio, getting yourself established in the marketplace as a property walla, as one would say, somebody who becomes a guy that is now an entrepreneur in property, and that could come from starting from owning your own home and then into perhaps investing into property, because it's one of the most safest investments that you're ever likely to make. And then, of course, once you have a portfolio, people tend to start to think, well, actually, you know what, I can do this. I can maybe go and build my own or convert my own properties and actually have a multiple operation. And that's when the sort of the 5 to 10 or the 5 to 100 sweet spot, as you say, starts to come into play. Almost made sometimes simpler than you actually think it is, which I'm sure if we had any of our viewers and listeners, listening in, they will come in and tell you the actual mountain that they have to climb in order to try and get there. But it's not something that's not an impossible task. It's just about the discipline and seeing how things can happen. It's not for everyone. I've known of people through my journey that have taken that route and just regretted it for many reasons, and the reasons we will share here as well. As time progresses, but certainly it is something that people tend to move on to as their sort of next stage, and there are various stages, Paul, of development that can be attractive. Equally, there are various stages that become totally unattractive, and primarily because you don't bargain for the amount of money that it could cost you, and the headache. The actual infrastructure could cost you, and that by that I mean the people that you're going to be employing to bring in, because there's a lot of people that you've got to bring into your fold.
This is a guy called Richie Clapson, who's the co-founder of a training company called Property CEO, and he's obviously training people to do this. So he presents the positive side of this. So we'll just talk about it and look at both sides of the coin, really, I suppose. So he's saying that small-scale property development projects have a bigger budget compared to, say, a flip or a refurb, and that means that you can hire an experienced project manager to oversee the work, which is a big plus because obviously you can take a bit of a step back. And also larger budget means that you can appoint a proper main contractor rather than, say, a jobbing builder, which gives you obviously a more reliable organisation, usually better systems and probably greater abilities.
Yes, so let's just break that down for a minute. So you start from your jobbing builder and the project that needs to be doing, and into the contractor side of things. So when someone is looking to start a project of a small building thing, it depends on what the infrastructure is going to be, Paul. Now there are many. I mean, if you're going to start from ground zero up, then you've got to say to yourself that what is involved. That includes construction, that includes foundation, that includes architects, includes maybe a small builder, not a jobbing builder, but a small contractor. It means planning, it means building regulations, it means consultants to come on and do it. Then it's a whole area of the people that you've got to bring in and manage and structure. And so in the main, it sounds really simple, but when you start to try and collect these people into making something happen, it's quite an interesting task, especially when you start to realize that one will often blame the other, and the blame game goes right the way through about why they couldn't do what they said they were going to do at the time that they said they were going to do it in, and the cost that they were going to do it in, because they've now had to do someone else's good work or bad work and make it good to make theirs good. And it just goes on and on. I mean, if I could sit here and tell you stories that I get to hear from clients that come in and say why. And not only that, we have sold properties to clients who have then taken on the task of building and refurbishing. And some years later, they are still making good because someone somewhere has let down. So whilst this gentleman is writing a very nice article about a dream operation, it really isn't the truth in reality, unfortunately, because human touch, human nature says that we can't account for what somebody else is going to do. And many reasons happen in people's lives, which then determine your lives and subsequently your costs. So small builders, like building from scratch, that is a bigger job than you would really truly imagine. There is other areas like conversions. So sometimes you can get a bigger, older house, which has enough space to either extend or convert into maybe smaller units. So, for example, we might have seen some older stately homes or bigger mansions, street mansions, especially in London, when you see that so many things have been converted, so many big old houses have been converted into apartments. Those conversions are a little easier because the infrastructure has already been there. The actual building exists, and it's about ripping out the guts and replacing the inside in order to make sure. But then there is another part of that creates a problem, and that is that if you are in what we call a listed building of some sort or a property of heritage, there are so many things you just cannot do internally, which makes that task even more challenging than you probably started out to think. And again, I've come across where people have actually literally ripped everything out and then been told that you can't do that, and the job's been stopped. People get involved, British English Heritage gets involved, all sorts of other people, and you could be just sitting there waiting for someone else who actually has no financial input other than the fact that it becomes a bit of a bureaucratic situation where, this is not the right way to do this, and therefore we're going to tell you how you do it, and actually they determine how much you spend and how much money you waste. So it's not as easy as it is. However, it can be very, very fruitful.
Yeah, he
And
says it's
fruitful.
not often a case that you do a new build because you've got to get planning permission for that. So it's often the case that you go, for, like you say, for a conversion project. So that's going to be an office or a shop or a bank or large house, as you say, restaurant, like industrial buildings, and they go into apartments. And he also says, of course, the government has recently granted comprehensive permitted development rights that allow you to change the use of these buildings to residential without needing the full planning permission. So it means there's less planning risk in doing it that way.
Yes, there is, and the government did produce a white paper allowing permitted development rights, which meant that there was a lots of useless properties. In other words, properties that were not used for their actual purpose any longer, and offices were certainly one of those things. And equally, some shops in some of the secondary or prime locations that were being used. Having said that, the local authority still has a certain input to see what that area is going to look like and why they. So you imagine walking down a high street, a fully fledged high street, and there's a shop lying empty, and somebody says, "Well, actually, I'm going to just turn this into a flat." It's not something as easy as that, because they will need to justify why that shop hasn't been rented or isn't lettable before it can be considered to convert into flats. So sometimes it's quite misleading to say, "Oh, this is easy," but actually it could get quite complicated. But yes, in certain other aspects, it is been made easier from planning point of view to say that you could do this, and make sure that it makes it easier for people to convert maybe a shop or an office or a cafe or whatever, and into a residential. But the question you have to ask when you do all of those things is residential ultimately everything? I mean, sometimes a good commercial retail unit might be situated in a fairly good location, which means that you could actually let that out to a business that is likely to give you a better return and less headache than perhaps a residential. So it's always about the numbers, Paul, at the end of the day. It's about what makes sense, that works. The office situation that was there has been there for some while now, some number of years, and mostly has been exhausted. And if it hasn't been exhausted, it's become extremely expensive, because the aspiration for people that own freehold office blocks have become far greater over the last 3 to 4 years. You can imagine that house prices have gone up, so subsequently their desire to achieve a better price for a freehold office to convert has gone up, and subsequently the building costs have gone up, and so forth, and it goes. And so it's not as attractive as it could be. The sweet spot for such things are perhaps a little bit more remote, and those are available. But then, of course, the problem with being remote is that they aren't in what we call good communication areas. So, somebody who's going to rent one of those converted properties isn't going to be near a transport communication system, or near a small shopping parade or something like that, where they can get their other conveniences. If it's stuck in the middle of nowhere, so imagine you go out in the country and there's an office park, and that office park has got a block lying empty, and somebody goes along and buys that block and then converts it into flats. Unless somebody's going to buy to live there, as a resident, but those that are going to buy to let and then let those, the tenants are going to have desires, because they're only there short term. They have a desire for conveniences, and the conveniences are such thing as, can I get there by rail? Can I get there by motorway? Do I have enough parking spaces, and so forth? So all of those things tend to come into equation when you try and do an office. And those are available. I've come across those, but because they're remote, they don't always have the same desire as perhaps in a town. And the ones that are in the town are either been taken up by larger developers, or are taken up by people that turn them into sort of little rabbit hutch. And that's the other problem that they have with conversions. Under the permitted development rights, they didn't have a given size as a minimum. So we found that there were many properties, many studios which were no more than a hotel room, for argument's sake, a bed and a little coffee area and a bathroom. And so that's okay to rent maybe in the short term, but ultimately it becomes difficult to sell because they were under a certain size that mortgage lenders. So there are so many roll-on issues that have to be taken into consideration.
Indeed. And looking at, I think this is probably Guy coming into us. Morning, gents. I know of a property that started as a grand house around 1900, then got converted into a church, then to 4 flats, then 2 flats got knocked together, so they were 3 flats, and then the ground floor and basement flats got knocked together, so they were 2 flats. And honestly, I now think the property could possibly have more value as a 1-bedroom or as a 1 home again. That's quite a story.
Absolutely, and again, because it is where it is, and we've said that. Thank you very much, Guy, for joining us, and always invaluable input from Guy Charrison. Yeah, I mean, and I've seen those, Guy. I've seen where they're completely converted and then gone back to it. And actually, the problem with going back to it sometimes is the complete hash up that they've made inside of it during that journey. And perhaps lost its original charm, and now you sort of have this sort of modern inside as opposed to what it would have been in a character. Not that everybody loves character. I was talking to somebody only the other day, and it was interesting that how lesser people like the character purely because it costs them so much more to retain the character, to find craftsmen that could actually do, for argument, sash windows. Is just ridiculous, and the charge for them. So it's just as easy to take the window frame out and stick a UPVC double glazing unit in it. But of course, English heritage says no, and so there's lots of other areas that become challenging in those conversions. You're right, Guy. It's probably now worth more as a house anyway.
I mean, he talks, Richie Clapsey, he talks about the developer playing more of a executive role and not really sort of getting into the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day, having regular calls and updates from the project manager who would be banging heads together. And you can see some of the logic in it because, presumably if you're in a situation where you're taking a task like this on, or you're thinking about doing this sort of thing, you've probably had a managerial or senior role in a company in your professional life. So a lot of the skills that a developer's going to need are managerial skills, organizational skills, people skills, decision-making skills. And these are the skills that people are using day to day. So there are quite a few transferable skills, perhaps.
I agree. There are definitely transferable skills, Paul. There's no question about that. There is a mindset of the type of person that can handle such projects. However, I have to say that they are completely going to be out of their depth in what is a theory management as opposed to what is a practical management. And the practical management will bring in people and their personal circumstances, which you have to handle in a very different way. And every tradesperson will always blame another tradesperson for not being ahead or behind the task that they have because somebody else hasn't done what they. So it's always going to be a blame game, and you have got to be a really patient executive, if you want to call yourself that, to be able to manage that situation. Of course, you will save money by doing it yourself, because if you bring in a project manager, it's just another tier that you're creating for, yes, to give a role, because unless, of course, you're in a very high-flying job which gives you a tremendous income, and becomes a hobby, and you're trying to do something on the side that will make it, then you can afford to get a project manager and listen to him or her to tell you what's going on. and him or her will tell you all the problems that they've had. It's just down the line. It's a bit like a pyramid situation. It's going to be the next person's issue, next person's problem. But if you want to take it on yourself, then you've got to weigh up the cost of and the value of your own time and time wasted, as opposed to what you could earn in a proper job, as they would say, which you all might be good at doing. So you just got to think very carefully about that. But yes, some of those skills are transferable, no question in my mind about that. But I think you'll find that they're very different skills.
He suggests that you need an architect to head up the design side, you need a contractor to undertake the construction, a project manager to oversee the whole thing, and he also suggests that perhaps you might consider having a planning consultant to minimise any risk on that side of things, and also a health and safety consultant to ensure you're meeting all the regulatory requirements.
Well, there you have it, Paul. I mean, you imagine having 4 or 5 people that you are now trying to get together in a room at the same time to say what are the problems. First of all, you've got to find them all because they've all got different projects to manage. You're never going to get them in. Secondly, I mean, the good thing I suppose that exists now is things like Zoom meetings and so forth, but people will hide behind all sorts of things not to get the thing done. As a business, and the guy who's running the business as a development and putting money in, putting his hand in his pocket to make something happen, you really, really have to have a thick skin and understand that there will be issues. I do not agree with the textbook style of this can be done and it's okay. One size does not fit all at all in this situation. You have to understand that everyone is going to have a huge problem. I have known of projects that could have been done in 6, 9 months, maybe maximum 12 months, let's say even the worst 18 months. 4 years later, they're still arguing about what the consultant for the planning says is right and what the architect says is right, and so forth. Subsequently, the size doesn't work or the situation doesn't fit into the frame, and so forth and so forth. And then, of course, we have the red tape of the local authority. You could be stuck in the system with a local authority for not weeks, days, for months, possibly even years. And that is all money that is coming out of your so-called profit that you're going to make. Sometimes it's almost worth saying, you know what, it's not for me. And that's part of the reason the big guys end up taking some of the jobs, because they have the infrastructure, they have created all those. And for you as a small jobbing new developer, you've got to put these people and you've got to trust them to make sure that they give you the right guidance and advice in the given time. And those are the challenges that you have to bear in mind.
Joe is right. Always a very popular comment on Facebook for you, Joe. Joe is right. Some of the PD conversions are going to be difficult to sell. Less than 300 square feet means it'll be unmortgageable. That's one comment. And then also the key to development is being well organised and not having many changes along the way, which I think is a fair point. Also, talking about the money side of it, Joe, that splits into two sides, according to Richie. Asset finance to buy the land or the property, and development finance for the development cost. He says that specialist commercial lenders will usually lend you up to 70% of the asset finance, which means you will need to find a deposit of around 30% to buy the land. However, many lenders are happy for you to borrow the bulk of this deposit from private investors who typically earn between 8 and 10% return on their cash annually, leaving you to fund only a fraction of the deposit yourself. The very same commercial lender will lend you 100% of the development finance to cover all the development costs. A fair bit of cash is involved, but most of it comes from other people, so you're not risking your own money. What's your thoughts on that?
Interesting. There's no such thing as a free lunch. We know that. So I think when you find that, first of all, there are, I think, probably less than a handful of handful of financial institutions in the given mainstream that would ever consider lending to a novice developer as much money as they can. I mean, they would spend years trying to analyze why they should even think about it. So that takes you to a particular niche of lender which are mostly bridging firms, firms that will look at it for 18 to maybe maximum 24 months. Really, it's 12 months to 18 months as a project task. And yes, of course, they will lend gladly because they are going to charge you handsomely to do it. And they will also have lesser requirements as long as their risk is covered, the value is covered in the project. And that's probably where most people tend to sort of veer towards. And that's what makes it easier to borrow money. And that's what this gentleman's talking about, that there are lenders, commercial lenders, that will give you both building money, development money, as well as purchase of the land or the property money. And the problem with that is that they then are holding it. So, if someone says to you, you can do this for nothing and we'll get everybody else to put their money, it's like having a board of directors and you're the chairman and you've got all these people now telling you, because they put their 10 pences worth in, how they want you to run your project. What do you think the likelihood of that project ever getting off the ground when you've got too many cooks that are going to tell you how they want you to do this, because obviously they've got money in it. So unless, it's no pain, no gain, unless you put your own money into this and run this yourself and you have the support and the mechanism, it's a textbook attraction that will attract people into something that they think they can do. And until they actually get into it, when it's too late, when you're in it, you're in it now, both feet, your money's tied up, you probably secured it against an asset, you've got lots of things that are now at risk, and all of a sudden, the next thing you know is, someone else, it's the old adage, I use it all the time, it's about the dog and the tail, or the tail and the dog. And the question here is, who's going to be wagging who? And I'll tell you now, it'll be your lender that will be wagging the tail, wagging the dog, as opposed to the other way around, because they are the ones that have the majority of the control. They've lent the money, so they're going to say, well, if you don't do it this way, we're going to tell you to do this, and if you don't do that, we'll take it off of you, and we'll still charge you for the money. And so it's be careful. All I say, I think it's really fun. It's really attractive, exciting to do, but it's not as easy as it's made out to be.
Well, it's interesting actually, because he concludes by saying pretty much the same thing. Please do your due diligence before you jump in. Make sure you know what you're getting into. Property development's an amazing way of creating worth, but it's not easy. As with all business ventures, reducing the risk is important. So I think that's an interesting look at small-scale property development. Thought that would be an interesting topic to cover when everything else is all about the cost of living crisis. So we're going to try and stay away from that as much as possible today. So let's look at our second story today, and probably this will be our final one because we've spent half an hour talking about that one. But I think it was interesting to get into it. It's the time to fix the buying process to add more rental stock to the market. So this is about buy-to-let investing, Joe. It's not the right career choice for the work shy, a bit like our last topic. While it's often a hugely rewarding thing to do, buy-to-let, both in the financial sense and knowing that also you're helping to contribute high-quality homes for people to live in. Given the turbulence in the wider economic situation right now, you'd be forgiven for assuming that buy-to-let investing might have taken a dip in popularity. But this post here from James Brocklebank says that's not the case. UK property continues to serve as one of the most dependable, reliant asset classes, which is what you say every week. The demand for rental property among tenants is reaching record highs, creating an enormous runway for buy-to-let investments to continue to grow as an investor section. According to Zoopla, demand for tenants is up a staggering 43% on last year, and the average rental property receives 30 to 40 inquiries. And what's more, landlords are becoming savvier and more knowledgeable about the best ways to invest. In particular, the proportion of landlords forming limited companies through which they buy their property is rising fast. They say that this first half of this year, the number of people making limited companies to do buy-to-let has gone up from 50% to 62%, and they're doing 2.5 times more property companies setting them up at the moment than they did 1 year ago. So it seems that everyone's getting the message that buy-to-let is still somewhere where you can to get some fruit for your labours, I suppose. And certainly looking at the demand from tenants up to 43% year on year, that would make sense.
Unquestionably, and I would say to all those listening and viewing that your safest investment, still without a shadow of a doubt, will be buy to let. Yes, it has its ups and downs, but it is not as encumbrant as perhaps trying to be a small-time developer. But without a shadow of a doubt, if you purchased correctly and you purchased in the right areas and where the demand is, then you will certainly bear fruit from your good labours of investing into property that you can buy to rent, buy to let. There is a huge demand, as you can see. Paul's given you the figures there. I mean, 40-odd% increase in potential tenants that are looking, and 40-odd inquiries for pretty much every property that comes on. If the property, and I'll say this very clear, if the property is a lettable property. If you're going to present rubbish, then expect rubbish. You know, you've got to be able to make sure that the property is nicely presented. It is what you would like to live in, not emotionally, not with pretty flowers and, you know, colourful things, but something that is clean, tidy, manageable, and there will be a tenant for that property at the right money, because people are keen to rent. And I imagine that over the next 24 months, maybe 3 years or whatever, the rental market is going to be a very strong market. We talk about the people that come out of the rental market. Those are perhaps people that have had stock that's been in there for some time. They've had the full benefit of that stock, and they now maybe have got lower leases and decide that it's time to exit. And the media picks up those situations. There are so many people that are coming out of the buy-to-let. What they don't understand is they're coming out of the buy-to-let primarily for financial reasons, not personal reasons. And financial reasons could be as this. One is that the lease is maybe lower on the flat or the property that they have, and therefore it's going to cost them probably anything from 15, 20,000 to maybe 50,000, depending, and maybe even 500,000 if it's in central London, to actually extend the lease. And therefore they say to themselves, well, that is a hell of a lot of capital for me to now throw into extending a new lease. It's better for me to cut, because I've earned the last 15, 20 years good rental money, let somebody else have this at a lower price. They can invest and extend the lease, and subsequently they'll have another 15, 20 years worth of income. So there are reasons and logical reasons, and I have those conversations quite a lot, and I'm sure guys have millions of conversations like that, where it makes eminent sense financially for those people to say, you know what, instead of me ploughing in money to extend the lease, let somebody else do that, but I'll sell it cheap so that I can get out and move that. The money that they get back from that property, they then tend to plough into perhaps another newer property, into a different location, a different area where they can continue to manage. The media always forgets to pick up the fact that those people have now bothered to invest their money that they took out into another project. The country cannot, and we know, cannot build enough quick enough to provide the homes that they wanted. It's been a farce, and it's not happened so far. So private landlords are the source for most people for buy to let. And there's no reason in my mind why I can say to you that you shouldn't. And yes, maybe the route to buy to let is through a formation of a company because of the taxation benefits it has. One good thing about having a formation of a company is it disciplines you, because you start to say to yourself, well, I've got to do the returns, I've got to put all these receipts in, I've got to do this. And in a way, it's a good management skill that it could probably put you under. Whereas when you do them as a one or two private rental, you kind of become flippant and think, oh, well, I'll do that tomorrow. And it kind of never had, not to say that you're not making money, it just doesn't discipline you into perhaps building a portfolio that you could do under a limited company. Because once you have the appropriate status of a limited company that have got now a good financial status, you can go to a lender and they will lend you further buy to let funding based on your skills and sets and company accounts that you've actually created in order to do that. So there's a lot of pluses in that, and I agree that there is still a good market, and I would certainly encourage buy to let as an ongoing good, investment of your own, just your own time value. So if you got a good job and you actually are looking to invest some of your money into something good and that you can manage, buy to let, I still think is got some legs for what it's worth, in my opinion.
Guy certainly agrees with you. He says, I was taught over 40 years ago the quality of the property will determine the quality of the tenant. One of the things that has not changed in the last 40 years. One of the things that a lot of the research in this article talks about is the process of buying the property itself, getting the buy-to-let property in your ownership. 70% of 70. This is a survey, by the way, by Get Ground. That surveyed landlords or potential landlords through the summer, several hundred of them. 77% of landlords told them that the process of buying a property decreased their appetite to buy. 4 in 5 of them, 78%, reported that at least one of the buy-to-let transactions had fallen through, and almost every single one, 95%, said the cost of buying the investment had increased in the last 12 months. And 88% said that the reduced time taken to complete, or reducing the time to complete a purchase, is the key to improving the buying process. Kind of obvious, that one. 71% said that better ways to source good property, and the same proportion also believe lowering transaction costs could make the process better. So it seems that it's still a really tricky process to try and get the right type of property.
Yes, it is. I suppose we all want to find the cheapest property with the maximum return. There's no question about that. It's kind of an old adage, really. But the reality is, you've got to look at the areas, and I will continue to say, look at the communication centres and where you're going to be looking to buy, and try and forward think where that's going to be, so that you can buy right, and you can invest early, and you can find where people are going to look to rent those properties. I absolutely cannot stand for the conveyancing aspect of it. It's archaic, and it takes forever to do some of the most simple things that you want them to do. And that's down to the individual to find a conveyancing company, a company that they have faith and trust in, and be able to make sure that they can actually get the process done much quicker. It doesn't actually cost a great deal more, but what the problem is the time that kills it. So you lose your will to live almost when someone says, "I'll do this for you," and it's a simple transaction. It's lying empty. You want to buy it. You've got yourself a funding, and it just could take 3 months for nothing, for just table tennis. This question, that question, this question, that question. And so with that in mind, and of course, the legals will do all of that because they want to cover their back. They want to be responsible for nothing. And you want it done quickly, and subsequently you're losing out, and you're the one that's always going to lose out because everybody else is going to blame somebody else that is not happening for. So you can't change that. It's there forever. You just got to find a right medium, a happy medium with the right person, and hopefully that relationship can blossom into something that you can develop regularly and more often, and have the comfort to buy every investment property through that source. However, that doesn't mean to say that it's a wrong thing to do. And forward thinking is very, very good. And you should look at the infrastructure. And whilst every time we moan about certain national infrastructure creations that are done, it is those national infrastructure creations that actually give you the wealth. So whilst one could moan about things that are not right for the environment, right for the countryside, right for look at where those lines are going to go. Look at the trains, where they're going to go, where they're going to stop, and where the new stations are going to be, and where the new areas are going to move into. And the further you go out, the lesser they cost, the better chance that somebody's going to buy or rent there. There's the hint. So look at those communication areas that are going to make your future brighter and cost effective.
And one final comment from Guy. He's talking about lease extensions. Investors shouldn't forget about buying freehold ground rents because you can get 5% return and have potential for substantial premiums for lease extensions in the future. That's something I think Guy specialises in, isn't it, Joe?
Absolutely, and I think Guy's absolutely right. People are, and I've been selling a few freehold ground rents lately, and I know Guy has done that historically a lot. And it is, again, it's something that some people can make good returns on, and equally, those that have the shorter leases on those will have to come back to the landlords to, increase their leases and terms, so there's the premiums to be paid. So, there's sometimes there are other aspects of our business, our property business, that are suited for some and not suited for others, but they actually all give some sort of reward and return. And whether you have a good management structure and you decide to go out and buy lots of potential freeholds. I mean, I've got clients that just simply buy freeholds and don't do anything else because they manage that situation through ground rents, through service charges, through maintenance, and then of course through lease extensions and so forth. So, and that is definitely one of Guy's skills, and he knows everything there is to know about that. I don't, but I would normally refer to him.
And that's the thing, isn't it, really? I mean, with both of the stories that we've covered today, the first and most important thing to stress is get some professional advice before you go into anything. Know exactly what you're walking into.
Yeah, no question. And don't be deluded by the idea that it's easy. It's simple. It's something that is textbook. It's not. We're here, Guy's here for many years. Guy joins our program quite often to give his view. I'm here. I've done 40 plus years, probably basically about give or take a few months, the same as Guy has. And we've gone through all of those with developers, buy to let, you name it. And we're here to help you guide that through, and we'll give you guidance towards the people that we believe are correct for your team if they fit, in what you're looking to do. So Property Matters is here as a program for you.
And it's a delight to say that we've got through this program without mentioning the word mortgage.
Oh, that's amazing. But you just did.
No! Yes, we decided to leave the cost of living crisis alone this week. It's a cost of living crisis free zone this week on Property Matters. We hope you appreciated that. We've not even mentioned politics either, which is another great thing not to have done this week. So we'll be back. We can't promise we won't do it next week, but we'll be back with another Property Matters at 10 o'clock next weekend.